we're in a unique type of industry. So most of the activity that our clients do is public record, because when you buy a property, it's recorded in the county recorder's office, whatever county in the nation you're in. So that standard has stayed the same, but with the advent of much advanced technology, greater big data, faster processors, greater algorithms, AWS data storage, facilities, et cetera, we're able to do it at a much, much more efficient, higher level than we were able to do before.
This is another episode of the Automate and Grow podcast. My guest today is Stephen Pollack, the president and co-founder of Anchor Loans. And Anchor is an alternative lender, I'll say, and he'll probably correct me on that. Multiple time winner on the Inc. 5000. They deal in a very specific space of the real estate industry. So Stephen, I really appreciate you taking the time to spend and share your experience and your growth experience in particular, which we'll talk about.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate it. I enjoy talking about it. So yeah, Anchor Loans has been around for 21 years, since 1998. We are, like you mentioned, a very, very niche aspect of the real estate market. We lend to the fix and flip industry nationwide. So that's our core business. It's the only business we've ever been in. We started back in 1998 doing this. It wasn't called fix and flip back then. It was called rehab lending, rehab business. But basically, it's the same thing. We're lending to businesses who are buying typically single-family homes, but it could also be a duplex or a triplex or whatnot. But they're typically buying a single-family home. They're buying it because it needs to be fixed up, repaired, added value. They'll buy it for X. They'll put a certain amount of dollars into it to make it renovated, almost like brand new, and then they'll sell it for Y and make some profit and continue and do it over and over again. So our mission statement is to create success for our clients and improve homes and communities while we're doing that. And that's
those are all awesome things to do, by the way, I think. So I always love anything that empowers entrepreneurs, and there's definitely been a boom of people in this space, like doing really good work. Really, in a sense, to modernize what's going on out there with housing, right?
Yes. Yep. Exactly right. And things have evolved in the 21 years. A whole lot of big data applications that we're taking advantage of. Evolution towards more smart homes, for example. Lots of different exciting things in the technology.
So the person you typically work with is the entrepreneur. That's your customer.
Yes, we have different levels of our clients. So it could be, we tier our borrowers our clients into 4 different tiers. And it could be anywhere from an entry-level client who has done it a few times before and does 1 or 2 projects at a time, all the way up to fairly sophisticated operations that might be buying 30, 40 properties a month.
Wow. Okay. How do I get to be that guy? So now I know where to go if I want to learn that.
We'll be happy to help you in your ladder of success.
I think I may take you up on that.
There you go. Okay.
As a real estate enthusiast and smaller investor, it would be nice to switch that on. That's interesting. So I think what really got my attention was, number one, you were on the Inc. 5000. I think this year you said you were around 780 or 760 is where you were ranked.
758, something like that. Yes, 760.
And that was based on a pretty phenomenal growth rate of 576%.
Correct. That's right.
I think the big thing that we talked about before we jumped on was, though, it's not like you're doing 5 or 10 million a year. Like, you're a pretty significantly sized business at this point.
Correct. Yeah. So last year's revenue was just shy of $130 million. So that was 2018 when I say last year.
Right.
Because that was what the Inc. 5000 was based on, the 3 years prior, 18, 17, and 16. And in that year, we originated $1.4 billion worth of loans across the country.
Wow.
Which from a consumer lending standpoint may not sound like a whole lot, but our average loan size is about $450,000. So it's close to 2,500 loans that we had to originate. Like we talk about around here, we have to flip a lot of hamburgers in what we do.
Well, it'd be a lot easier if you just had to flip hamburgers, but yeah. So in your, I guess, the one thing is you've been around for a long time, but you still seem driven to grow. So, what's behind that?
When we started in 1998, there was 3 founders, myself and 2 co-founders. We started with our own money and some friends and family money. And the reason we started the company was because we were investing in this type of vehicle, and we saw an opportunity to actually be more in control of our own investments and create more opportunity for our money to invest. And we grew from there, and we were a Los Angeles, Southern California-based company for many, many years. We were in a situation in which we had a unique kind of business problem in that we had more business than we had money to lend to that business.
Okay.
So we actually had to turn away business because we didn't have enough capital, which allowed us to pick and choose who we did our business with. But it's a close to $100 billion opportunity nationwide type of a business. So when we lend $1.4 billion, that's still only the tip of the iceberg. There's lots of other large national players, other large regional players, and lots of little local mom and pops. It's a very, very fractured industry.
Okay.
And it's an industry that's ripe for consolidation, bringing efficiencies to it, which means that we can bring efficient capital to our clients so they get more efficient capital, not only quicker, but more certainty of capital and more cost-effective capital for them. So it's a win-win for everybody if we can continue to grow, provide quality service, provide added value, help our borrowers along their ladders of success, whether it's from becoming a tier B borrower to an elite borrower, like you were saying, the 30 to 50 a month guy, helping them achieve whatever level of success they want to achieve. So it's exciting to do that. I enjoy what we do. We have a great team here, 150 people working here in the office, as well as a whole host of people around the country and offshore too, as we were talking
Right.
about.
You were saying offshore development,
Yep.
where it's sort of South Shore,
Yeah.
Brazil.
Way
right?
offshore. Yeah.
So, obviously the market itself is really large. But, for a company go from, 150 employees, that's fairly significant over 20 years. What are some of the big lessons that you learned from that? And how do you maintain the growth? Like, how do you still, in spite of all that, still grow? Just, I'm sure the market's not growing 500% either.
No, the market's not growing, but the opportunity for us to grow is allow us to capture existing business that maybe is not being served in the best manner, served most efficiently or the most cost-effective manner. And the number one lesson people ask me all the time, like, what's the number one lesson you have in order to be able to grow your company? And that is allow your people to make mistakes.
That
You
makes
can't
sense.
do everything. You can't be there looking over their shoulder all the time. So what does that mean? That means that processes when you were 10 or 15 people and you had your hand in everything, which is what we were way back when, then you could be very efficient. You could limit your amount of mistakes. You can make 100% great decisions all the time. You can't do that when you're 150 people. You have to allow them to learn, and just like when you're a parent, when you're a parent, you're certainly not going to just leave your 18-month-old for 2 hours all by themselves, outside of the crib to do whatever they want, right? But when they are 18 years old, well, they get to learn by their own mistakes. They get to, they have their driver's license and they go off and they drive, and you hope they whatever mistake they made isn't too bad. But you have to let go. And so letting go is super important, which also has the effect of allowing people to feel as though you trust them. And it's empowering to your people. And they like that. People don't like to be micromanaged.
Yeah, that's very true. I think I don't know anybody that said, "God, I wish you'd micromanage me more."
Yeah, exactly.
And then, so your business of the 150 people, like, what are you guys focused on? Like, do you have traditional siloed roles like marketing, sales, support?
Yes.
Sounds like you've got some outsourced technology pieces. What does your organization look like?
Right. So you'd come in here and you'd take a look and you would see all the typical things you would see in a company of about our size. So we have a finance department, we have an HR department, we have a technology department. And relates to real estate, we have a processing department, an originations department, an inspection department, a valuations department, asset management department. We have a marketing department. So we have all those things. Everybody has a unique role within a unique department. We have a great management team, and then people underneath them doing those individual jobs.
Given who your customer is, you're not really a B2C type company. You're more B2B2C, right? Even then, it's like B2B, like in entrepreneurs, right?
It's mostly B2B, correct. We're not, our customer is not Joe the butcher who has a job, has a 9-to-5 job, and then on the weekends he is fixing a property.
Right.
Our customer is one who is either doing this full-time with one or multiple properties at any given time. And that might be an individual, but it also might be an LLC or a corporation or an organization that has infrastructure with the full-time employees and whatnot, like I mentioned before, with the high-level people.
So my next question was, what, if anything, has the impact from a digital point of view been on acquiring or servicing those customers?
So
Or has it changed? Is it the same as 20 years ago?
it's yes and no. How's that for an answer? So it
No,
really hasn't changed in the sense that we're in a unique type of industry. So for us to capture clients, most of the activity that our clients do is public record.
Okay.
Because when you buy a property, it's recorded in the county recorder's office, whatever county in the nation you're in. So that's all public record, and we can see who's doing that multiple times and figure out where our clients are. But so that standard has that type of business model, that type of resource has stayed the same. But with the advent of much advanced technology, greater big data, faster processors, greater algorithms, AWS data storage, facilities, et cetera, we're able to do it at a much, much more efficient, higher level than we ever were able to do before.
I mean, that's positive. That's a good impact.
100%. Yeah.
And are you using that as a leverage point also just more for internal operations? Like, do you find there's an impact there? Like how
Yes.
is that applied in, because you mentioned processes, for example, it's
Yep.
probably pretty tough to go from, 0 to 150 people over time without automating
Exactly.
stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So we've spent a fair amount of time, energy, and treasure, if you will, building out internal software that touches every single aspect of our business. It touches our accounting department, it touches our processing department, it touches our originations department. It's our CRM system. We can text from it, we can email from it. Borrowers can input loans directly into our portal off of our website.
Oh, great.
When they have new information, it just all gets up. They can upload documents right there. We've developed all that. And in regards to the process part that you led off with the question of, we've developed checks and balances within the process that limit and sometimes eliminate the possibility of human error. So if we have a loan that needs to move through a process, and 7 times during that process it needs to, in order to advance to the next stage, it needs to check off these 4 or 5 different items, we have the software make sure that it's being done, so nothing could ever be mixed. And if it's not checked off, it can't progress forward. So we take the grunt work, if you will, away from some of our human capital, our team members, that don't necessarily make it intellectually challenging to them, and allow what our human team members do best, and that is to use their intelligence to deal with people, to do the things that software, at least not right now,
Sure.
can do, right? And
Yeah, totally
so
makes sense.
it allows us to be more efficient. It allows us to also to be more motivated in what we do.
And that's one of the things that is one of the themes, obviously, of Automate and Grow, which is build digital products, automate marketing, sales, and support. So I find it interesting, that I think what happens usually is you kind of either don't come up with a plan, you start buying tech or building tech based on pain, right?
Right.
Or someone has a plan and then you build the tech or modify the tech around that. It sounds like, though, you've gone the route of completely custom everything. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, we have a few third-party off-the-shelf software that we've purchased that just makes sense to do so. For example, our accounting system, but we've integrated that into our main software system so that information is just pulled and uploaded and not necessarily, we don't need data entry people to do that sort of thing.
That's probably the biggest pain, because you kind of mentioned the origination point, I'm sure, is not that automated, right? Which is like the records and the documents and stuff.
Yep.
So what were you always like a build it first type philosophy, or did you?
Yeah, that's pretty much what our philosophy has always been. For example, in terms of just growth as an organization, there's typically 2 different methods that you can achieve, and one is to grow organically and the other one is through mergers and acquisitions.
Oh,
And
true.
we've always been a build it yourself. We've always just grown from within. We've never purchased smaller operations or try to absorb smaller operations. We always believe we could just build all those things ourselves.
And obviously successfully. I'm sure there's some pain with that sometimes, but it seems like it gives you control in your particular circumstance.
Yes. Yes, on both points. It gives us control, and yes, there's some pain involved with that. There always is, right? You learn and grow, and sometimes you wish you knew things and would have done things a little bit differently. But that's part of the fun of it.
So where do you see this business going in the next, let's say, 10, 15 years?
Well, I see it continuing to grow. I see the consolidation continuing to happen. I think it's going to be difficult for some of the smaller organizations to survive because of cost of capital and efficiencies that they can't deploy because they just don't have economy of scale.
Mm-hmm.
But I also see huge advantages coming for our clients in regards to the application of the blockchain to real estate technology. I think that is on the cusp of happening in many, many cases, and I think that that's going to, I don't know if disrupt, I don't know if it'll be a disruptor effect, but I think it'll certainly bring a tremendous amount of efficiencies. And those are things we're looking into and looking to see how we can piggyback along the top of that to bring whatever advantages that may deploy to our clients. So I just think there's a continuing evolution. Like somebody mentioned to me the other day, so most of us have a smartphone. I happen to have an iPhone, right? iPhone didn't exist 10 years ago.
This is what I've been reminding. Well,
10,
2007
maybe.
technically, but
okay, so 11.
Really, this is new.
Yeah, right. 11 years ago, 12 years ago, it didn't exist. You think like, I can't remember a time that I didn't have a smartphone, right? So, you ask me what's going to happen in the next 10 years. I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the next 10 years.
So I just put together kind of a report or a white paper, and some of it's based upon Peter Diamandis and Ray Kurzweil's writings, right? And they're kind of futurist type guys, and they talk about 20 mega trends that are affecting where things are going. Part of it is this discussion around cryptocurrency, but you mentioned the blockchain, which is kind of like the underlying technology. And I guess in my head, it sounds like you're similar bent. I think crypto's been swept up in this crazy mania of, this almost like shady underworld. But the technology itself is interesting specifically for real estate and your industry. Like, what do you see there? Like, how would that change things?
So let's just on the very, very basic level, the whole idea for your listeners who are not super familiar with blockchain is to have a certainty of chain of title in regards to owning and whether it's one Bitcoin or whether it's whatever the asset may be,
product or a company or a property for that.
Exactly. Right. So right now you have a multi-billion-dollar title company insurance industry that insures a buyer that the seller really has the right to sell their property to the buyer. And there's insurance for that. It's called title insurance or owner's title insurance. And part of the chain of title is to research and make sure that there's no breaks in that, there's nothing missing, where your seller isn't a fraudulent seller, et cetera, et cetera. The blockchain eliminates all that. And instead of it making a days or weeks long process to do the necessary research to make sure that your insurance, it happens in a nanosecond.
Instant, right?
Right.
So
I think that's that alone is I'm sorry, say again?
I think that's called a smart contract, right? Is that kind of the idea?
Right.
Like,
yep, that's right.
Instead of having a contract where the terms and conditions and all the, I own this, you own that, and here's how we're going to change, are in words, and someone's got to interpret it. It's like in the electronic contract, so to speak, right? It's on the blockchain.
That's right.
And it's verifying it because it's like, here's two parties that have identity. That's kind of what you're talking about.
Correct.
That's really interesting. Okay. I mean, that could be potentially, which I don't care, damaging to the insurance industry. Which I don't think they're great actors, frankly, but
I'll reserve that because I have my own opinions there. We have our own issues there, but I'm sure that, for example, Henry Ford didn't care really much about the horse and buggy industry too much when he revolutionized the auto industry, right? It's just when the market has the demand for it and will pay for it, it's coming and it'll be there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, and that's very forward thinking. And I can see where within 10 years, that becomes real. Like someone's going to be motivated. Probably someone is motivated to solve that problem using that technology. So that's really interesting you brought that up. And you're right at the top of that space. So it's kind of interesting to see if you're the guy that does it.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. Yeah.
Well, Stephen, I want to be conscious of your time. So I just want to ask, if you were going to give advice to someone that is trying to, start or take a company and turn it into a high growth company, what would the one or two things that you would advise them be?
So one or two things. Number one, I would make sure that you listen to the market. If you want to grow, especially if you want explosive growth, you need to make sure that the market is telling you that it's really there. As much as psychologically or philosophically you might believe it's there, if the market tells you otherwise, the market is the market. The market always speaks in our capitalistic type of environment. So if the market tells you, then figure out how to take advantage of that. And that is those are the two key things I would tell you. Make sure that you really truly have a market there. And number two is when you try to take advantage of that and act on the potential of explosive growth, just realize you're going to make some mistakes, you're going to have some setbacks. Nothing is ever a straight line up, but realize that if you don't attempt to, you'll never achieve it. So you have to attempt.
I love it. That's great advice. Now, in the background, I noticed you have a few books there, and there's one that's on the top on my left, your right, I guess. Tell
Okay.
me about Simon Sinek and what your feedback on that book is.
Simon Sinek, which one? Start with Why or The Infinite Game?
Oh, well, you got both.
I
Okay.
have that one. I also have Leaders Eat Last. So I've read all of his books. Simon Sinek, in my mind, is a visionary. He is someone who is attempting to change the mindset of business leaders across not just America, but across the world, but mostly here in America. I wholeheartedly subscribe to his philosophies. For those of you that are not familiar with Simon Sinek, he has one of the most popular TED Talks of all time. You should go check it out. Start with Why. It's very, 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 very inspirational and motivating. He talks about Apple. He talks about Martin Luther King. He talks about the Wright brothers. And if I can get his philosophy correct, it's a sense of if you can. Everybody knows what they do. Okay, I am a data entry technologician. I am a dental hygienist. Whatever. Everybody knows what they do. Most people know how they do it. That makes them different from other people. What their differentiator is, or what their market specialty is, or what makes them different. Why people should go to them. But very, very few people, very, very few businesses know why they do what they do. And if you can realize why you do what you do and reverse the order of your communication from why to how to what, you are more likely to get followers and get true believers and get raving fans. Right? As Simon Sinek says, people buy why you do things, not what you do.
I love it.
They buy why you do, not what you do.
That's a great summary, by the way. I referenced that in my book, Automate and Grow. So I thought it was ironic that you had it there, and
there you go.
You hit it right in the head of what I took away from it anyway. And I think his point is that legendary brands do this.
Correct.
Like
right. The Apples, the Harley Davidsons, the Southwest Airlines, the ones that will fans and customers will use their products to the exclusion of all else. People will stand online for 6 hours to get the new iPhone when they could just wait a week and get it in an hour. The next, So
I love it. Great reference. Thank you.
That's what we try to do around here with Anchor Loans, in a small sort of way, to lead with our why, with our mission statement of creating success by improving homes and communities, and have everybody, whoever is in sync with that is part of our team.
I love it. Thank you. That's great. I appreciate you sharing that. I'll wrap up with two questions. The first is, how are you, Stephen, changing the world?
I'm changing the world because my why, it's interesting you brought that up, because my internal why is as an educator. I've been a professor at UC Berkeley for 7 years. I love to teach people and help them understand the world better. I love to learn on a constant basis. And so what I try to do is to help people learn, either whether it's about themselves or learning a new fact or learning how to do something a little bit better. in my small way, I just try to help educate the world.
I love it. That's an amazing mission, and that's definitely very inspiring. And it's interesting that you are I assume part-time professor.
Well, I was a long time
Okay.
ago. I have a very
Okay.
storied career. I mean, my first career was as an eye doctor before I ever got into real estate.
Wow.
So
We could do another episode on
I
that.
can do a whole episode on my 4 different careers.
Amazing. I love it. The different seasons of Stephen.
Well, maybe that should be my podcast.
Hey, I will help you do it. If you want to create it, you just let me know.
All right,
All right. So the
appreciate that.
final thing that I will wrap up with is when we have interesting guests on the podcast, we like you to nominate other interesting guests. We usually talk to experts or entrepreneurs that are doing something unique and exciting in their industry. So who would you, Stephen, like to nominate as a future guest of Automate and Grow? There is no wrong answer, but
I'm trying to think of a good answer. Does it have to be an entrepreneur? Yes or no?
Entrepreneurs, experts, or people that you think would be interesting to talk to.
So Angela Duckworth wrote she's a professor, wrote a very, very interesting book called Grit.
Yeah.
About how things get
I was
done.
going to say, I think I've read this book.
And I've heard her on a few conferences or podcasts here and there, but she's a fascinating person to listen to.
Okay.
Another person maybe would be interesting to interview would be to flip the coin on Stephen. I'm trying to remember what his last name is, but the fellow that wrote Freakonomics and has a Freakonomics podcast.
Yep.
He's an excellent interviewer, but I would like to have him be on the other side of the microphone for once and have somebody, interview him and talk about all the different things that he's learned and whatnot. He's Dubner, Stephen Dubner. That's his name.
Okay. Do you know either of them, or?
I don't know either of them personally.
Okay.
No.
So
I wish I did.
I was going to say, I will take the introduction, but we will accept the nomination. I like that. It's a really good suggestion. So I'll have to do a little legwork on that one. It's a little tougher than normal, but I like both options. So
there you go.
Stephen, I really appreciate you being my guest today. Thank you for your time and your insight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate having me on. It was great. It was fun.
No problem. This has been another episode of the Automate and Grow podcast. We will see you on the next episode of Automate and Grow.